really appreciate you coming out here today.
Thank you, ma'am.
And talking to us. Can you just tell me your name and what organization you're representing here?
My name is firefighter Antoine Calloway, and I am with the Charlotte Fire Department. I've been with them for, coming up this September, it'll be 11 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Are you from Charlotte?
I am born and raised Charlottean, a high school graduate of South Meck High School in 1992.
Okay, where did you live? What part of town did you live?
Now, once you become a firefighter, you sort of start locating it around the fire station. So I grew up in between stations 10 and 2, which is West Boulevard, Wilmore neighborhood.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So Charlotte is your home. You're born and raised here. So you've seen these changes.
I've seen the changes from the beginning to the end. I left for college in 1992 when there was only 2 Walmarts in the city, one on the north side of town, the university, and one on the south side on Arrowwood and South Boulevard. And I've seen the growth between the people and the buildings and the skyscrapers and the population. I came back home in 2003, and it was a world of a difference.
Yeah, it changed I think if someone disappeared, left and came back another year, there's so many different things with all the building and development going on.
Yeah, if somebody does come home to visit and you call out a location and they're like, where is that? And I'm like, you have to think of old stuff that used to be there, been up there, tearing down a lot of old and historical places in Charlotte.
Right. And you know what? With the change, it became like a super big awakening of a change during the COVID time.
Oh, yes.
Because people weren't out walking around and seeing things.
The full city didn't seem full all of a sudden.
Right.
And it was amazing that so many people actually stayed inside when they told you to. I just knew it was going to be a lot of people that was doing their own thing, but they literally was inside, and all you saw was about 9 or 10 cars on your street throughout the day.
and to see how the city changed in those years while we were locked down was something crazy too.
I saw a lot of reconstruction and remodeling while they had a chance to, because with everything being closed down, a lot of people wanted to do different corrections and modifications, and that was like the best time to do it because they didn't know how long it was going to last, but they knew they had time to do it.
Yeah. What do you remember during the early days of the COVID, 2020, that March, 17th?
March 17th. I know it very well because that's the weekend that we were going to celebrate my grandmother's, was that 2020? That would have been her 94th birthday. And we celebrate the weekend of her birthday, which is March 21st. And in fact, I was supposed to be in the St. Patrick's Day parade as one of our Charlotte firefighter mascot that day. And they canceled everything by that Tuesday that week.
Exactly, they did. Everything shut down. I remember leaving work. So that's why I said 17th, 19th, one of those days, I remember we just left. So what did that do? I want to ask some questions that are kind of like personal as an individual, and then I'll ask some questions that will kind of be mixed in between that had to do with your career being a firefighter.
Gotcha.
So when you were off in your personal time, what did you do during this lockdown? Because this was so new.
It was very different for me because I live alone and I'm big in the community. So, between visiting family, extended family, boys and girls clubs, different schools, and rec centers, it was kind of hard because there was nothing to do. So it was a lot of me time. A lot of people had to get used to lowering themselves or either being around themselves and seeing what they can handle.
So what did you do?
I tried to stay in a little bit of shape. So a lot of people, you see a lot of people got into bike riding, walking a little bit more, being more healthier because they almost didn't have a choice to. So I did the exact same thing. I started to visualize. I actually moved during that time. Okay. So I got used to a new neighborhood and learning my neighbors and the atmosphere.
Okay. So that made developing relationships with families and neighbors and friends different during this time as well.
Very different because I'm very active in my church at Greenville Memorial in Zion, and the elders make the church. I mean, I was born and raised in that church. In fact, everybody in my family was born and raised in that church. And you can see the difference of how not being able to see each other during that difficult time period, especially the elders. I think the elders are literally missing it the most compared to like the young people. We lost a lot of church members during that time. And I think it was because they felt so isolated because they would look forward to making it to church on Sundays and seeing the people that loved them and appreciated them.
Have people come back to church?
They have, but it is very different. I mean, we're skipping every other pew, just trying to make sure we're still safe, still wearing masks inside, and the social distancing that's a new norm, as they call it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, was how has the pandemic changed your normal routines that you would have done in your personal life? What are the things that you still feel like you're doing now in 2023?
Visiting. Again, I'm big in the community, and I like going to different schools, and sometimes now you have to do a lot more screening. You have to make sure that's up to you whether you may see teachers or workers at different places with the mask on, because it's maybe still mandatory in their place of business, whereas I keep mine with me at all times just in case, because that's not something you're used to, and some people are abiding by it, some people are, it is what it is. Let's try to get back to normal as best as possible.
Okay. What were some challenges that you had to face during this pandemic?
New different protocols, even something as simple as like, again, I was very close to my grandmother, so now I'm coming to her, visiting her, trying to keep my social distancing, but with a mask on. And we tried to explain it to her, but it was kind of different for her to actually understand what that meant. So all we could keep telling her is that we're trying to protect you. I think she might have wore a mask for 32 minutes maybe, but she was not going for it, so everybody around her had to wear the mask. So that was real different than visiting.
Oh, I can see. So that's something that still you're being very cautious.
Yeah, you still, because the elderly, they still are in a predicament because they're not doing what they used to do. So their immune systems and all that is not the same as it used to be.
What did you learn about yourself during this time? Because you said you had to be alone a little bit.
Yeah.
You're so used to being out in the community and reaching out. Now you had to
I came to the conclusion that I actually don't have a problem with it, but not for a full 24 hours. I mean, with my work schedule, working 24-hour shifts, so I'm usually home during the daytime, and I may take a nap, I may do a whole lot of running around, or even just come home and sitting still enjoying some peace. But around the time people are getting off of work is when I'm ready to get out of the house. And the days where where nobody was accepting company or just regular visitors, it was like, okay, what are you gonna do? So it was I got into different TV shows, and I'm not a TV show watcher like that.
So that also told you, that was more of a learning experience too. It's like, I'm looking at this television.
Do something different. I probably should have been into this DIY like everybody else was, been into a new home, but I was still trying to see what's what and how to go about it. So that's one thing I would love to have changed if I could have.
How do you think this experience shaped you as a person?
To be acceptable of exactly what's right in front of you. It showed that you cannot predict the future or even depend on what might happen later on. Do what you can do right now, enjoy who's in front of you, and possibly enjoy yourself and your personal time.
All right, so now let's get into some of how the COVID-19 pandemic affected your daily routine as a firefighter.
We had to become very precautious. We added more PPE, which is personal protection equipment. As far as every medical call we went on, we had on mask, we had on goggles, and sometimes we had to do hand connecting, and we automatically wear gloves, but we actually had on the full body suits, being protective. One of the biggest questions was COVID. so I can't think of the name of it. What is it called when you've been exposed? Have you been exposed to a COVID in the last 48 hours? It was one of the biggest questions that really shaped how we approached different medical calls.
Mm. And as a person who, you in your personal life, you talked about how you really connect into community, and that took a little bit of change in how you had to interact with them. Were there changes that you had to interact with your teammates and your colleagues?
Oh, man.
How did y'all have to work together?
We actually have put out there a couple of times about congregating in between the change of shifts, where that's the part of the brotherhood that the fire department speaks about, being personable in the 7 o'clock hour. When one shift is coming in and the other shift is coming out, we were actually told to keep that to a minimum. So it was kind of hard to just to be personable like you normally do, as far as with your coworkers or your peers. It was extremely different.
Mm. So, what did you guys do to keep that brotherhood? Did you have to develop something different to keep that? Because that's important to the job.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you have to sort of pass on what happened the day before. So it was still done. It was just done in a briefer moment, like sitting down, conjugating, having coffee, and just chit-chatting, kicking with each other. It turned into a very short time frame because it was worried about the day before.
Mm. Gotcha.
Yes.
What additional safety measures or protocols did you have to follow as a firefighter during the pandemic?
It was a big deal about body temperature. That was one of the biggest things we did. As you came in the station, your body temperature was checked. Your temperature was checked daily. That was one of the biggest things, along with additional PPE, as far as like I said, the bodysuit. And if you had to deal with somebody who was exposed, you had to make sure that you took off the exposure gear, cleaned in it on a daily basis, if not 2 and 3 times a day, just dealing with how your calls went.
Did those safety measures and protocol help?
They did. We actually. Of course, it wasn't preventable to not catch COVID. You could be doing everything right and still be exposed. So it actually did its job.
Okay, kept it down to a minimum. I guess you're saying. How did this pandemic affect your mental, emotional well-being?
Again, not being able to do your norm this thing that they call the new norm was something totally different. A lot of people dealt with it in many different ways, some positive, some negatives. Again, me personally, I adjusted because I am a people person. I love to be in the presence of people. So when it was unavailable and people were not being accepted to visitors, I had to sort of just, I guess, became more of a phone person. You start making sure they're still okay, because the wellness checks made a big deal. And I told a lot of people, don't forget about me, because I live by myself as well. So what I would normally do is go on a visit. So not being able to visit, I needed somebody to make sure that I was all right. I didn't want to be over there down and out. Nobody know it either.
Right. And then for your job, that is already a stressful type of job. Yes. And then to have this additional thing, how did you just stay sane within that?
I could say that being in my crew, we literally kept each other's spirits up. I mean, throughout the day, tried to keep as much as normal as possible can, as the joking and making sure everybody's all right, keeping up with each other's families and just making sure that their mind is all right. You actually got a little bit more personable, try to, with your immediate crew.
Mm-hmm. And as you said, you guys had to help each other stay, checking on each other, connecting. Because this is a very stressful job, and then added COVID to see so much stuff too.
Yes.
You saw probably a lot more than normal. Were there any upticks in calls for you guys?
It was, because there was a lot of protocols where a lot of people wasn't being able to get out and go to their normal doctors to get simple maybe prescriptions or even remedies that they would normally get by going to their personal doctors, where they sort of limited people coming in. So it was a lot of. It was calling 911 for a little bit more than the average. Emergencies, there wasn't really emergencies, but there was a lot of stuff that they couldn't do themselves.
Okay.
So they was trying to figure out how can they get close to normal as they possibly can.
So that increased definitely because people,
Yes.
you got a lot more calls to come out.
Yes, a lot more calls because, again, some of the simple stuff turned into 911 calls because they didn't know how to get to what they needed to get to.
Okay. Because of those different calls that were made, did you have to adapt any of your work protocols to help handle some of these types of questions?
Not really, because when we go, we come with the list of questions that when they're telling us what their symptoms are, we're adjusting our question asking to what their symptoms are and what the actual case may be.
Did you have to develop any new skills, or were there something to do?
I could say attempting to do some CPR in full body suit was something different in the summertime. You're naturally sweating, and now you're in a full body with mask, with goggles, with head protection. It was pretty different.
I bet so.
Even if it's something as simple as just moving around and doing something simple as chest compressions was a big deal.
Did you face any difficulties balancing your professional responsibilities as a firefighter with your personal life during this pandemic?
I could say yes because of traveling. Traveling became something as simple as like getting the tests, the shots. Mm-hmm. Those became a big deal of to be taking the shot or not to take the shot, where you could and couldn't go throughout your personal visitations during the holidays. I mean, I know it was limited, but it was even more limited about who had what and what they were requiring to come.
Yeah, we've seen it all over the place because people were trying to, whether they want to take the shot, not the shot, which shot to take,
yes,
what not shot to take. And so some people had the luxury of not taking anything because they were going to isolate themselves. But as an essential worker for our community, you didn't have that luxury. And so I'm sure some of those things still were spiraling around in your head.
Well, my family, we attempted, with having an elderly grandmother, matriarch, we actually limited contact if you had not taken the shot. So that was something that was, like I said, in my personal life, it was definitely already adjusted. In the work life, we had to, like I said, the extra PPE made a world of a difference, and it played a big part for the exposures.
Was there any level, were there any changes, in the level of community support or appreciation during this time?
Oh no! I mean, I think it probably raised a tremendous deal because, again, at one point in time throughout the country, only first responders were out on the move, along with like truck drivers. It was a huge deal. That's all you would hear was "Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service." I don't know how you guys do it. And it was, again, with our job, we actually come into the job knowing that it's public first, us last.
And I definitely appreciate and thank you for
Yes,
what you do as well, because we needed that. We needed to see the world still continuing to operate in some kind of manner. And I think at that point we saw the unsung heroes that, even though we know we appreciate the firefighters and police and all these other first responders, I think it was a bigger appreciation when that's the only people we can depend on being out there to work. So I think I definitely want to thank you for that. And because you were still out there, the potential to, that risk was higher for you guys to get COVID. So how did you and your colleagues cope with that? How did you feel? What were some of the emotions that may have been going on?
I could say anxiousness probably raised a bit, but also precaution, not only for ourselves, but each other. Like helping to get the equipment off, the extra equipment off, making sure that when you cleaned your extra equipment, you cleaned theirs as well. Just making sure that we, like I said, as a group, we're a tight-knit family when we're at work, and we're making sure that our brothers and sisters are all right, just like we are. So we did a lot more, I'd say, having each other's back. It definitely raised the level of making sure your stuff was clean along with your partner's stuff is clean, or your captain's stuff is definitely clean, and making sure it's up so it'll be dry for the next call or something like that.
So were there any extra cleaning duties that you had to change?
Of course, like I said, being that we were wearing masks, something as simple as masks and goggles, making sure the goggles was cleaned off after every call, or where there possibly was exposures, and making sure that we were exchanging masks as much as we could to keep from taking one incident exposure to the next.
Okay. Is there what lesson, if any, do you think other firefighters, can take away from this experience at working during this pandemic?
As far as the lesson goes, I would definitely say the importance of PPE and definitely having your teammates back or your crews back, because again, you can't do it all yourself, and you're going to need each other to do it. And that's what what our profession is all about, is having each other's back and making sure we get the job done.
Thank you. Were there any moments or incidents that particularly stood out to you during the pandemic? Was there anything that happened during those 3 years that just really was a thought-provoking or a memory that you're never going to forget during this pandemic?
Just the fact of who and how people were being affected by it. The way that it was constantly in the news about somebody who could be completely healthy one moment and gone the next. I lost a couple of buddies of my own, personal buddies from childhood, and they had of course, the underline is the part that we don't know, but the fact of being healthy with the visible played a big part of just being able to lose someone and knowing that you got to appreciate it while you have them there.
So deep appreciation for the people who work with you and
I'll say all around the life itself, and being able to appreciate the time that you do have. Something as simple as maybe procrastination was definitely put on a hold, because now you got nothing but time. What's your next excuse? And you couldn't do what you wanted to do, so it turned out to be to do stuff that you may have needed to do and didn't want to do.
I think what you pulled together is like community is very important, and I think it just grew in how important
when it's taken away from you, yes,
and family and friends. When it was taken away, that separation. The
fact that what you don't have, again, you know how they say you don't miss it until you don't have it anymore. And the appreciation of knowing that it was going to come back, not to what extent. Like I said, the new norm still has has played a bigger part as far as population in certain areas, but you do have the access to it again. I'm very active in something like our Boys and Girls Club, and of course, when you go into the Boys and Girls Club, there was a big protocol as far as like the mask and the kids being able to see your face. It's not the personableness went away. Being personable went away during that time frame. So to get back to, again, the new norm, but being able to see faces and being able to talk, it played a big part.
Did you have a feeling, like you mentioned earlier, how people in the community thank you for doing what you're doing? Did that change or increase your appreciation for the job that you do?
It did. You really don't realize how much a role you play in the community until it comes from others. I remember when I first got the job, I was an educator before, and the appreciation level, I would never think it would be where it needed to be for educators. But when it comes to something like being a firefighter, just being in the grocery store line, somebody would turn around and say, "Thank you for your service." Just hearing you talk about what you do on a daily basis or that particular day, it just makes people more appreciative that, in a joking manner, better you than me. So they'll thank you for it and appreciate you for it in the long run.
Awesome. We do this project because pandemic, this is not the first pandemic.
Yes.
There were others. And part of the archives is to collect those voices that weren't heard from the pandemic's in previous history.
Oh, wow.
And most of the time it were people of color.
Okay.
And so that is why we chose and looked for people to make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't as people of color, but we also saw that there weren't voices of the people who were out there sacrificing their lives.
And believe me, it makes a world. It plays a big part because you never know what may need to be said.
Right.
Coming from the outside, like I said, outside looking in, but from the inside looking and being able to express it out can play a big part as far as sharing some knowledge or some hands-on knowledge and experiences to help people understand how serious or how important it is.
Right. You're so right. And when you don't have all those different voices at the table to share, because your experience may be very different from someone else's experience.
Yes, ma'am.
And so these are lessons that we've learned that in those previous pandemics, they didn't have enough voices being talked about to say what happened to our society.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's why it made it a little bit difficult now, because people were thinking that, this almost acted as though this was the first pandemic we've ever had. And you're like, no, it wasn't. What lessons did we had no lessons to learn from that.
I think a big part is being able to get it out without being, this computer and technology world nowadays is way different than the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Surely the 80s and the 70s where there was no computers. I still remember having my first email address in the late 90s, and here we are 25 years later, and the technology has went to another extreme.
Do you think the technology move is what, with the pandemic, increased and I guess increased the usage of technology, and I think also probably advanced it even faster?
Yes.
Because
I would say it did definitely, because that was the way that people was communicating, being seen, being heard, and being informed.
Right.
There was a lot going on in social media. I mean, people, to this day, I think people just like seeing themselves talk now compared to what happened during the COVID days where they were able to do it and everybody was looking at every video that popped up. It was so interesting to see a different face and figure out what they were talking about. And now the way that it had actually opened doors for a lot of people with different entrepreneurship, working from home, getting new jobs, being able to start something that they may have not have started had they not been forced to be with themselves, to themselves, and by themselves.
Do you think, did the fire department, did they increase with any type of technology, like the use of anything else new? You don't have to name it, it's kind of secret stuff. But did you use anything? Because like you said, there was a lot of not talking to each other, or there was a limited amount of conversation happening. As
far as social media goes, again, a lot of people were. So we have 43 fire stations in the city of Charlotte right now, and 2 more being built. So if nothing else, it was a way of keeping up with what's going on at the other fire stations, where now some of the fire stations have their own social media pages.
Okay. Was there anything else new that was developed during this pandemic for the fire department?
To my knowledge, I do not think so. But of course, I wouldn't know everything. But I can imagine some stuff has happened, like you said, behind closed doors, and it's been used, and we would not even know about it. Because IT played a big part during that time. Again, like you said, social media and just being computerized and keeping up with stuff.
Okay.
Because we couldn't be hands-on and so personal.
Do you have any additional stories or experience or anything that you'd like to share about during this time?
It was very hard. It was very heart-touching because, again, being an active member in my church and the elderly church, we lost a lot of church members during that time, and I truly believe that it was because they could not get the touch and the love from the congregation or even their family members that they were used to get and that would normally get and expected to get on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So that played a big part. I mean, extended family and, again, even my own personal family.
Do you have any last words?
I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this project. as far as not knowing what to expect. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would possibly be. But again, when you're giving somebody's personal outlook on it, that's exactly what it is, their personal outlook. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Antoine
Yes,
Calloway.
ma'am.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.